So things are progressing nicely with our form, and this time around what I want to get started on is posting information to the REST API, to the backend. So let's go back to our code and let's get started. So I'm looking at editmovie.js, and way down here somewhere we have handle submit. There it is, on line 35 in my code. And this is the code that will actually execute when the user fills out the form and clicks the save button. So what I'm going to do is write some code that will grab the information from the form, convert it to JSON, and then we'll write the fetch code to call an API or a route on our REST backend that doesn't yet exist, but we'll create that in a little bit. So the easiest way to do this, first of all, what I'm going to do is move this event prevent default to the very top of this function so it gets called before anything else. And I'll get rid of this console log was submitted. And what I want to do is grab the information from the form. So the easiest way to do this is to create a constant, and I'll call it data, and that will be equal to a new form data. And we'll get the content for that, or the argument for that, from our event, event.target. So now we have some data, and now I'm going to convert that to a payload. So const payload, this is what we'll post, is equal to object, the built-in JavaScript object class, and we'll call the fromEntries method on that, and we'll pass it data.entries to get all of our form data. So that's now in a variable called payload. And let's just say console.log payload. We won't go any further than that right now. So let's switch back to our web browser, and I'll reload this to make sure it's actually current. And I'll open the JavaScript console, and I'll fill some information out. So title, I'll just call it, this is my title. And I'll pick a date, so release date will be whatever. Runtime is 100 minutes. The MPAA rating is PG-13. We'll give it a 4-star rating and some description. So everything seems to be working well down here. Our movie state variable is populated the way it's supposed to be. Now let's save it and look at the console. And what we get back is this. We get an object with all of the necessary entries in that. So now we have something we can actually post, which is good. Now there's no form validation yet, and we'll get to form validation in a bit. I'm not going to validate the entire form, but I'll show you how to add validation to one or two of the input components, and that should be sufficient to get you started. So let's go back to our code, and let's actually write the request to post this. So what I'm going to do is create another constant, which I'll call request options. And that will be equal to method. We're going to use post for our method. So we'll have to create the appropriate route on our back end. And we'll put body, and we'll just call json.stringify and pass that payload. And now we'll just fetch. And again, we're going to be fetching to a non-existent route, so we have to go create that in a moment. So we'll call fetch, and we'll pass it http ://localhost port 4000 v1, and I'll call it admin and just edit movie. And then we'll get our response, which will convert to JSON. Try that lowercase. And then we'll just console log the response. Okay, so this is now set up, except that I need to pass the request options here, which is why I created those. There. So this is now set up to actually make the call to our backend. But of course, we actually have to change our backend code to handle this particular route. So let's go back to our backend code. My application is running right now, so I'll stop it and hide the terminal and go to my routes file. And let's create a route. I'll just put it right down here. So router.handlerfunc, and it will be http.methodPost. And the URL we want is /v1/admin/editmovie. And we'll call a handler that doesn't exist yet. app.editMovie. Okay, so now let's go to our handlers, our movie handlers, and go down here, and I'll just take one of the existing ones that was a kind of a stub code, and I'll just call this, well, we're going to use insert and update will be the same thing, so I'll delete insert and change this to edit movie. And right now I'm just going to have it hand back some JSON. So just to make this simple, I'll create a type specific to this function, and we'll get rid of this eventually. JSON response, and that is a struct, and it will have one member, just OK. It'll be a Boolean, and in JSON we'll call this OK, like that. Then I'll create a variable called OK of type JSON response, and OK will be true. And now I'll just write my JSON. Error is assigned the value of app.writeJSON. Scroll this up a bit. We'll give it w http.status OK, and we'll hand it OK, and we'll wrap the whole thing, I'll just call it response. This is just a temporary placeholder, and again, if there's an error, I'll just copy one from up here, save some typing, paste this in here, and now we have a path we can call. So let's start our application, go run ./cmd/API. That's now running. So I can switch back to my web browser. I'll clear the console, and I'll reload this to make sure it's current. And I'll just put some data in here. ABC, or AC, I guess. Pick a date, pick a runtime, MPA rating, put a number in there, and some text. And now when I post this, I should get a response back. And I do. I get a response right here, and I can look at it in detail, and we'll see that OK is set to true. So we've now successfully connected to our back end, and we've actually posted some data there. Now what I want to do in the next lesson is just to add some basic client-side validation. We should have server-side validation as well, but right now I'm going to worry about client-side validation. And what I'll do is just maybe do validation to make the title a required field. So you can't actually submit the form until you have something in the title field. And if I do it for one input, you should be able to extrapolate that and apply it to all the inputs. But we'll get started on that in the next lesson.